Hello and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most nocturnal work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And before we dive into Sine Die 14.4, just a quick note that we, that super secret announcement that we hinted at last episode, the video announcing that is up. If you haven't seen it, there's also a longer announcement in the podcast feed of this podcast that you're listening to right now. But in short, we're doing a 24-hour live stream on the 7th of March, so get excited.
Yes, I mean, the schedule for that is starting to come together, and I think, we'll probably post it as it's evolving soon. So we'll keep you updated on that. But we're very excited. We're keen for a lot of fan interaction, fan feedback. Like, we want to know what everyone else wants us to do. So hit us up with any suggestions or whatever.
Yeah. Now, should we dive into Sine Die 14.4? Because
let's do it.
Yeah, it finally happens. Blake makes himself wings, but more importantly than that, I think he finally kind of ruminates on his thoughts and whether they're fully his own, which is a long time coming, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I love how this is like finally happening because he's getting wings. It's like getting wings is so Blake, yes. Freedom, birds, etc. It's always sort of been his thing, and he's had so many, what I think I'm safe in calling kind of objectively terrible things forced on him by the abyss, and he's just sort of been like, gotta do, Blake gotta do what Blake gotta do, type thing in the face of them, and now he finally is getting something that the real him would actually want. And I feel like that's what's finally triggering him to be like, hey, hold on. What about all the other things that have happened to me without me? And it's like, it's so funny that kind of this is in a lot of ways the best thing that has happened to him since he was in the drains. And it's the first thing that's starting to make him sort of reflect on what's been happening to him the last 5 arcs. Yeah.
It's good that he finally does this reflection, right? But it also kind of exposes some horrifying things that he's mostly just been glossing over. He realizes that his long-held belief that he's a terrible artist really is just because Rose got the good at art half of the, of Ross. Which is, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy that Blake hasn't stopped to think about this a bit more, considering how much importance it seems to have on his life and what is actively happening in the story right now.
I mean, it's pretty existentially significant as well as horrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he's had stuff going on, so I don't blame him too much. It's not like he's been sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah, he's been busy.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like this is something we have kind of glossed over as well, and in part probably because Blake hasn't, but it's like something that it's like, I hadn't thought about it for at least a while, and I was sort of like, wow, that is really fucked up. Like, imagine sort of realizing that, things that you had written off as just something about yourself is actually something that's not true about kind of not quite yourself, and it's something that was taken from you. Like, that would suck a lot.
Yeah.
Good thing it's Blake, so he doesn't have much time, or he doesn't give himself much time to get bogged down in this, because I feel like a normal person would very easily get very lost thinking down this train of thought.
Yeah, and it would be so tempting to just consider, well, all of the aspects of my character, everything that I think I'm bad at, is that just a direct result of intervention? Like, is there any me that actually exists in there? Like, ooh, I hate that.
Because, I mean, that's the thing, is Blake doesn't just have the classic human experience of what is me. He has the classic experience of what was me, and like what's the crap that's filled in the cracks, basically. It's like next level existential horror, and I mean, in this case, I think this is where Blake's mindset, where he tackles life, is a bit of an asset, because he doesn't let himself get bogged down in how truly horrifying this really is.
See, you said that was Blake's mindset, but is it?
Fair.
So the other thing that is good about this is it kind of helps Blake realize, hey, this is the same thing for Rose. And he kind of has this realization that for her, not being able to make friends and not being able to have friends is this, which is I mean, it's even more horrifying, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to trivialize the horror that Blake is feeling, because obviously it's legitimate, but not being able to make friends, having that be taken away from you is like, oh, God.
Especially in a world where connections are so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And it maybe makes Blake be a bit more empathetic to her. We'll see. It's kind of hard to tell whether it will stick.
I mean, he definitely has, like, sympathetic thoughts in the here and now.
Yes.
Whether those thoughts will last an actual confrontation with Rose and the, overwhelming karma and just natural antagonism these two have for each other, we'll see. But at least he manages to squeeze in a thought of, wow, she's had it pretty tough too.
Yeah.
Which is fair, because she has.
Yeah, which is good.
I mean, now she's engaged to Alistair, so, like,
yeah, it gets worse.
She's not really cruising.
Yeah, she probably could have got a better husband if she was able to make more friends, you'd think. Anyway, so Blake starts working on his wings, and at first it's kind of triumphant, but it quickly morphs into more body horror as he realizes that his body is not aligned with him on how this should work.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I love how quickly this goes from, oh no, like the problem here is that I'm bad at art, and then the body starts kind of taking over, and you're like, oh, whew, that's okay. Blake's body's going to make it. Oh no, it's making it terrible. It's a fun little sort of roller coaster that I think is really capped off with the fact that finally, Blake is like, hey, you know what? Fuck you, Abyss. Like, no, this is my body. Still a little bit, and this is something I actually want, and I want it done properly, and you can fuck off if you're gonna try and take it, and I'll even hyena myself to get it the way I want, which is, like, I don't know, that's just classic Blake. It's like, well, I'd rather hyena myself than have it your way.
Yeah, no, it 100% is classic Blake. And I want to make a comparison to Ward here for a second. So spoilers for the current parts of Ward.
Wait, how current? I've only finished Arc 17.
Which one's that?
The one before. The current one is Arc 18.
No, you're current enough.
Okay.
So spoilers for up to the end of Arc 17, I guess. It reminds me of, or it starts out reminding me of, the way that Victoria in Ward treats the wretch, right? As this kind of thing that exists in her consciousness, even though it never really responds to her, but kind of an ally that she can bounce things off of, is the way that Blake, it feels like Blake treats his body in this chapter. But then his body actively starts responding, and you're like, oh, cool, they can have a symbiotic relationship. And then it starts getting more and more horrifying, and you're like, oh, wait, no, go back to being a silent passenger body.
I'd actually argue Blake has probably been more of a silent passenger in his body transformations. I think that's a fair comparison. I think the really interesting angle about what's happening here with the wings is these two both kind of want the same thing. They want Blake to have cool wings. Well, they want Blake to have wings, and there's just a disagreement about what kind of wings those are going to be. And I think that's like, it could just be, the Abyss doesn't want him to have wings, and Blake wants wings, and they're sort of, he's fighting to build them. But I love this angle of fighting over how. Like, it's just an extra little twist that makes it sort of more interesting, and I think fits in with the comparison you made to Ward.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? And I kind of, the way it resolves leaves me with a lot of questions, but I guess we'll get to that in a second. So Blake's body continues to fight him before basically asking him to make a deal with the devil, right? And Blake refuses to play by those rules.
Yeah, and we've already sort of touched on this, but this whole situation, this is vintage Blake. Like, this is the Blake who, is stood in front of Conquest and is like, nah, fuck you, let's do a contest where the odds are stacked in your favor or whatever, like, fight me in real life. And like, the one who hears is gonna die and it's just like, nah, fuck that, I'm gonna do what I can till then. Like, this is some of the most Blake stuff that's happened in a very long time.
Yes, it's very like, fuck that response. I love it. Yeah. It's great. It's a good one. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, like, I think we have to talk about how fucking creepy the imagery is here. Like, he feels like a shiver down his neck, which is obviously like a universal sign for something's wrong. Yep. And that manifests as little bits of his neck actually crawling around and trying to gouge his eyes out, which is like...
Yay!
might be right up there for one of the Wildbow images that has like pierced my soul the most. Which is obviously like that's not a slim category.
It's like his neck turns into little wooden maggots that want to feast on him. It's horrifying.
It's basically like the scarabs from the Mummy, but they're little like finger bits.
Every other episode with you, it's the scarabs from the Mummy. I swear to God.
I love the Mummy. Everybody go watch the Mummy, but the Brendan Fraser one. Anyway, this really got to me for some reason. I don't know, the idea of your own body kind of sprouting little digits and trying to claw your own eyes out was like extra horrifying.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's also talk about how Blake is kind of, he gets out of it because the Abyss basically offers him this deal of, I'll take the rest of your flesh and give you the wings the way you want. And Blake, sort of takes the third option, as he's wont to do, and says, no, I'll get you a meal from somewhere else, and it's going to be even better than this. And the Abyss kind of seems to be like, okay. I don't know. Like, I mean, for me, this reminded me of that boogeyman we saw, I think it was last arc, who was dragging the Duchamp woman into the Abyss.
Yeah.
Which actually, like,
the kind of butchery character.
Yeah, and Megafire on our Discord kind of pointed out to us as well. That was something that didn't come up in our discussion question, but probably should have. Like, when we asked if Blake should be proud of what he did with the Duchamps, both Blake and us forgot about the fact that he didn't really help this woman who was,
he just let her die
to the Abyss.
But she probably deserved it.
Did she though?
No, obviously not. Nobody deserves that.
So I mean, I guess for me, this invoked that image, and I was like, I guess, you know, I'm not super thrilled about the idea of Blake promising that the Abyss is just going to get its meal from somewhere else. Like, unless he's going to give it goblins or something, like that feels like it's a door that doesn't probably go a good place.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what the repercussions of this deal are. I kind of got the feeling that Blake is like, thinks that just throughout his natural energy and kind of actions, he's going to invariably cast people into the Abyss anyway, and so it's not like a huge deal to make, but that's kind of horrifying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's terrible in its own way. I don't know, especially like not even if he doesn't turn into one of these people who's dragging individuals off to the Abyss. The way Jacob's Bell is kind of on the line, I don't know if these are the sorts of deals I want Blake making right now.
Yeah.
This seems like not the time to be promising the Abyss big meals.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to keep my eye out for when the Abyss decides to call in this debt, I guess.
Yes, we shall see. A fun note is that Blake's sweatshirt, which we've kind of tracked turning into a part of his body over time, now is unraveled and becomes the membrane on his wings, which is just a fun progression for this item to go on.
Yeah, I originally congratulated the sweatshirt on the promotion to becoming a part of Blake's body, but then I realized, I don't know if you can be promoted to be part of Blake's body. It's a bit of a train wreck. I mean, you know, it had a pretty shit gig anyway. It was part of his body. At least now it gets recognition as, like, just a straight up part of his body.
Yeah. Before we move on from this section, from the section where Blake's body turned into maggots to eat his own face, it just kind of made me think back to... Do you remember a year ago when Blake was talking about how his body was, like, the one thing that felt like it was his and he had agency over? What a sad thought that is.
Actually, barely, but yeah, that's a really good point.
Back when he was getting clean in like Arc 4 or something.
It was to prepare for the fight against Pose. Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, my tattoos, they're mine, you know, my body's mine. And even these other things I don't feel that strong of a connection to, but my body is my one thing. It's like, Sometimes I think about that and I think, what a sad journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, in it was towards the end of Arc 7, and Conquest confronted Blake with like ghosts of his past.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you tried to do that now, it's actually the ghosts of the past that would be horrified of what Blake has become, not the current version of Blake.
Yeah, the ghosts of the past would have no impact on Blake because he doesn't remember longer than 2 days ago.
Yeah, like there'd be an interesting inversion if you tried to fight Blake with the horrors of his past right now, because I think he would be more horrifying to them than vice versa. It'd backfire a bit.
He would feed off of them and he'd get stronger, probably. So yeah, Blake now has wings, I guess, is the summary. They're bat wings, and he realizes that they don't really give him enough lift to take off. He runs outside and basically has to dive over some hot fires to use the heat to get enough lift to get him into the air.
Yeah, and so I want to make sure I'm understanding all this wing stuff right, because it was a bit confusing my first read through. But the main wing joints, like the equivalent of the humerus on these wings, isn't strong enough to support the wings flapping. So when he wants to use the wings, he also has to like hold on to the whatever you call the elbow joint of a wing with his hands. So he's kind of like flapping it with his hands. Is that?
I think so. It's a little hard to pass, but I think that happens, at least at the start. Maybe his wings get a little stronger after.
Yeah, it sort of became clear to me later on when he has things where he can't sheath the hyena, so he has to drop it. And so, yeah, I agree. It took me a while to sort of grok what was happening, but I think it's like to actually use the wings, he has to hold them with his arms as well, which is just like a really interesting mechanic, because you get arms and you get wings, but to kind of use the wings, you have to use up your arms. Yeah. I haven't seen that before, and it's just kind of a nice little twist to kind of, vary it up.
Yeah. I want to touch on these wings because, so I think that Blake feels victorious here, and we're kind of getting a bit of this, yes, you had a little spat with the abyss, but you won kind of vibe, right? And Blake has wings, yes, and he didn't need to make a deal with the devil in air quotes to do so, but it kind of feels like
he still did though. Like that was the thing that stood out to me from when he thinks this. I'm kind of like, well, you did promise it a bigger meal. Like, what are you on about?
Yeah, and also like these wings were representative of him being a monster in his abyss nightmare, right? And so what this really made me think was like, it just feels like the abyss is manipulating him, like, oh yeah, you beat me. Oh no, I didn't get the thing I wanted. That's fine. But you still have wings and you're going to go fly around and fight shit. And like, that feels like it's what the abyss wants anyway. It's kind of like a very hollow victory, because regardless of the very small victory that you made in your negotiations with it, you're still doing exactly what it wants.
Yeah. Like, obviously, I think the fact that they're part of that vision detracts from the sense of this is good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, I guess I think I remember saying a bunch in Arc 10 and not being really proven right in any way that, this change could be good, and Blake should pick parts of his humanity and pick parts of the monstrousness to lean into. This feels like what I was picturing back then, this idea of Blake likes wings. The Abyss wants to give him wings so he can fuck shit up. Like, this could be a sort of mutually reaffirming, beneficial transformation. I'm less confident in that read because it's happening so late now that I'm kind of like, well, what Blake is there left?
Yeah.
But like I'm cautiously optimistic about the wings, because to me it represents that idea of like, this is something that old school Blake would have wanted, and so maybe this is something that represents, change for the better, which is essentially what Blake fights for, to get the wings that he wants.
Yeah, I don't know. My read on it is like, if something feels like it's a bit of a mixed bag, like partially a victory and partially a loss, that will surely, as it has many times in the past in this story, just come down to being, it's a loss, but you didn't really understand how bad at the time. I feel like we need some more definite wins that will actually turn to be mixed bags rather than mixed bags that turn out to be definite losses. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I guess I like, obviously the jury's still out. He only just got these wings. See how I feel at the end of the story. But for now, I'm maintaining cautious optimism that this is an example of something that can help Blake as much as it helps the Abyss.
Yeah, true. So he's made this trade-off, but his wings don't even let him fly properly, which is a bit annoying. I'd be annoyed if I was Blake and I gave away more of my humanity and, didn't give away my humanity, but promised to, sell a soul to the Abyss and didn't even get proper wings.
Yeah, it does feel like the Abyss kind of shortchanged him a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he's about to go into some woods. Hopefully there'll be plenty of material for him to maybe improve them a bit.
Lots of trees. He'll just take a break and do some lumberjacking and then fly to catch up to the others, I guess.
Classic Blake break.
So Blake, takes a few cracks at taking off, and he starts to kind of sputter to life with his wings, starts getting some lift, but is still reliant on these hot air currents to do so, until Evan comes in and uses his Evan magic to help Blake fly.
So I just want to read out this quote that Blake thinks as he's soaring over the fires and getting kind of close to some. Testing my ability to fly, or to glide, while literally above a trail of fire was perhaps not my smartest move. And I mean, first of all, that's probably one of the most Blake things I've ever read. Because he's right, it is perhaps not his smartest move, but it's also probably not his dumbest. And I think that's very reflective of just who Blake is. And in a chapter where I feel like a lot of times I'm saying, hey, this feels like vintage Blake. I mean, here's another one. Like, yeah. I don't know. I'm getting a sense of hope again that Blake's in there somewhere this chapter, and I'm waiting for that to get taken away again as the arc progresses.
Yeah, you're right. And these moments of him flying around with Evan, you really do get this spirit of, despite the fact that there's a giant and a dragon there, you do get this kind of spirit of joy and fun that they're getting from this, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is a bit of a dream come true for, like, actual Blake.
Yeah, and Evan's cheery reaction to this really helps sell it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's so good. Evan is so good at swooping in after dark or serious moments of this story and just brightening them up. His bit where they fly up really high and he makes like the, this is the best call, this is the worst call joke, is one of the funniest moments of the chapter. Evan's just such a shining light in this story.
Yes. Now, this actually, combined with my previous thought about the Abyss still getting a win here, this actually made me a little uneasy, because I kind of realized that every time Blake makes one of these trade-offs where he sells a bit of his humanity away for some cool power, Evan is always there being like, whoa, that's so cool, that's so awesome. Which, yes, it is, but it's like, it kind of undercuts the horrifyingness that I think Blake should feel a bit more when he makes these decisions. Yeah. I don't know, it makes me worry that Evan is actually kind of glamoring over the horror and the slope that Blake is sliding down full speed.
I mean, again, I'm going to lean into my explanation of, hey, this doesn't all have to be bad, and Evan is just encapsulating that. But I mean, I think the thing that really stood out for me here with how Evan gets involved and helps to Blake to fly is that's such a perfect symbol for their relationship. Like, you've talked in the past about like the whole idea of Blake probably not having survived this long without Evan. Like, him deciding to familiarize himself with Evan kind of gave him the boost he needed to survive all these things he shouldn't have, and that's why he's still here. And I mean, that is so perfectly encapsulated with the idea that Blake has these broken wings that don't quite let him fly. They're not quite complete, but with the help of Evan, he's actually able to fly.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a very nice continuation of their relationship, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Again, cautiously optimistic.
So the giant and the dragon are trying to swat this wooden fly that is now buzzing around, annoying them. But Blake is able to hold his own, and he windwakers this giant, stabbing it in the forehead with the hyena, and then scrapes up the dragon's wing pretty bad as well. So good job, Blake. Good aerial combat.
We are sort of kind of glancing over a decent chunk of the chapter here. Just because it's mostly just this really fantastic fight scene. I talked last chapter about how I was excited for some aerial combat. This wasn't at all what I expected, but it is even better. It's so like we haven't just dived into this idea of Blake can now do like barrel rolls and is this ace pilot.
He still feels very clumsy.
Yeah, he's someone who's still learning on shit wings, and so he's like all over the place. It feels so gritty and like he's barely staying afloat. Meanwhile, he's fighting like a very practiced duo in a lot of ways. It's really fun. So this we're only going to call out some little bits and pieces from a huge chunk of the chapter here, but just because it's not really the sort of stuff we talk about on here, but it's really well written.
Yeah, it actually, Blake isn't really fighting the dragon and the giant for most of it. He's avoiding them. He doesn't really land any blows until the end. The main thing he's fighting is just gravity, right? Just like learning how to fly.
But of course, because it's Blake, he's doing most of this learning to fly within arm's reach of the giant.
Yes.
Which makes it, more action-packed.
Yeah. I'm not sure what to... Like, I don't know what to make of the implications of this standstill. So the battle kind of ends with Blake injuring the dragon and the giant a bit, and he gets injured a bit, and then he flies off and they don't chase him, which he takes to mean as, okay, we're calling this one a draw, right? And I'm not sure what the ramifications of that are. It feels like the giant and the dragon give up a little easily, which maybe means that it was meant to end this way. Or maybe that, I don't know, that Blake stabbing this giant was enough of a don't do this, that it was kind of, the giant is shocked a little bit and trusts that karma is going to take care of Blake now.
Yeah, well, because that's the interesting thing, is the phrasing that Blake remembers in this chapter and that was mentioned last chapter is that you shouldn't touch giants. Not to not kill them, but
yes.
That, like, it's kind of, you're going to get people up in arms, apparently, even if you just touch them, which are, like, dropping half of a sword in the forehead of one seems like it would qualify.
Yeah, except it doesn't seem to, like, it doesn't kill it. It doesn't even seem to hurt it. I don't know.
Well, I guess for the giant, having the hyena dropped in your head is sort of the equivalent of like a wasp sting or something.
Yeah, I guess.
But yeah, like I do agree. There's sort of a sense of, even though the dragon had lost its ability to fly, which really feels like the main win for Blake here.
Yeah.
It does kind of feel like they were just too willing to give up. And I don't know exactly what, they're meant to be achieving here. We don't know what Johannes sent them out to do exactly. It may have just been to distract, and maybe they've accomplished that. But there is a bit of a sense of they were too willing to call it a draw, considering how much better they are in general.
Yeah, I guess it's fair to keep in mind that these aren't others that Johannes is like bound. These are favors that he's calling in. So it's probably fair to assume that these aren't others that are going to like get themselves killed for this fight.
Yeah, you're right. Once they're injured, they're probably like, man, fuck this.
Yeah, I'll just stay at a different hotel.
Yeah, so I think the other thing I want to just quickly mention is Blake has his new wings. His wings are made out of shitty old sweatshirt. And the first thing he targets is the dragon's wing membrane. And that's basically how he incapacitates it for now. And I don't quite know what to read into it yet, but it feels just very poetic, this idea of the guy who just got cool wings has just instantly taken out the enemy with wings by attacking said wings.
Yeah.
It's sort of this sense of, no, wings are my thing. Fuck off.
Yeah, maybe it's just him realizing that wings are actually more of a vulnerability than you might initially think.
Exactly. Either that or it sets a very bad tone for the wings he just acquired.
Yes. There's a great line by Evan as they're flying away from this battle where Evan says, "Oh man," I could hear Evan as he kept me aloft. "Oh man, it's going to be so hard to keep you alive now." Which is so true. Blake did not need more mobility to throw himself into suicidal situations.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Evan. Like, this is the last thing he needed in that regard.
Yeah. But yeah, that the chapter ends here with Blake and co heading off to Mara's hut, ready to face whatever awaits them in the forest.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. This was a fun little detour, and Blake leveled up in a way, but now we're sort of back to the actual point of the mission, and I don't think Mara is the puppeteer here, but I do think she's going to have incredibly fucked up shit at her hut.
Oh, she always does.
I'm very excited for this confrontation that will presumably end in Blake realizing this isn't even where he needs to be. What would be funny, again, is if it, like, do you remember in Signature when Mags went on that fucking epic journey to get to Mara's hut? Yeah. And then it was like, "Mara, will you help me?" She's like, "Nah." And then it was like, okay. It could be funny if we see something like that again.
Yeah.
Because I'm not convinced Mara is the puppeteer, but I think she will be someone that they probably shouldn't have gone and fucked with.
Yes, it seems like she's always aware enough of what's going on that she probably has some info, but will be very, very reluctant to share it.
I mean, honestly, probably the best thing that could happen for Blake and co right here is if Corvidae shows up, because I assume he's still bound to Blake because it's still the nighttime. So hopefully his way of being useful is to help them, like, not talk to each other, basically, to just stop the confrontation, because that's kind of a win-win, and that's maybe the best he can do. Of course, he's cleverer than me, so Corvidae will probably find a way to be helping Blake and make it worse.
Yes, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, this was an interesting little chapter. It was short. It felt really short, but it did give us a taste of aerial combat, which is nice, and I'm sure we'll see more aerial tricks throughout the rest of the story.
Yeah, I agree. That should be fun. Like it's kind of a chapter that was half horror section, half fight. Yeah, like for me, this chapter sort of reminded me a lot of how effective Blake can be, like Blake proper, not like, you know, Blake the boogeyman that we've known him recently, who's obviously effective in his own way.
Yeah.
But like this is sort of the resurgence of the vintage Blake way of dealing with stuff. And it was really nice to see.
Yeah, a lot of classic Blake stuff this chapter.
Yeah.
That's the end of Sine Die 14.4, but it's time for us to loop back around and take a look at some discussion question answers to our previous discussion question, which was talking about places that may have fallen into the abyss. And with all of these world-building-y lore kind of ones, man, we got so many good answers.
I really think we did, so why don't we just dive straight in?
Sure. So we, of course, got an answer about Atlantis from Love TB. Thank you, Love TB. But there were some interesting twists on it. Love TB kind of talked about the idea of Atlantis being very opulent, and so they imagined that Atlantis would be occupied by people who either had or have riches or were prideful and kind of have fallen from grace and now are in this abyssal location, which is kind of always sinking but never quite reaching the bottom, which is a touch that I liked.
Yeah, that was a nice little line. Yeah, because, so I might be wrong, but like, isn't the original sort of myth of Atlantis built around the idea that the gods kind of got envious of Atlantis and sunk it with the tidal waves and earthquakes or whatever? And like, that feels like it could fit into Pact very well, as this idea of if there was a human settlement doing very well, the gods of the time may have just been like, oh, fuck this shit, and ganged up on them. So
yeah,
it does feel very Pactish.
Or even just an envious patron of a god invoking their wrath on it.
Yeah, exactly. We had a really cool answer as well from Megafire7, who talked about something I'd never heard of, called Sanakov Land.
Oh yeah, this was a great one.
And so this is like an island that was claimed to be discovered by this Russian explorer called Yakov Sanakov. So of course he just called it Sanakov Land, which, you know, I'm not going to pretend I wouldn't do the same.
Yeah.
But it kind of seems to not exist. Like nobody's ever sort of managed to find it, and it's not where it is on the charts.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of kind of scientific explanations for what might have gone on here. But Megafire likes the idea that this may have been the domain of like a Russian practitioner that kind of tried to form a domain out in the middle of nowhere, so it would be easier to claim a large section. And then, you know, whatever they were planning to do there didn't work because it was so far out in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing to anchor it to reality, and it slipped through, which I really like that. Yeah,
no, it's a cool idea. Like having a private island domain and not quite realizing that mistake. You kind of do the ritual and nobody turns up to you know, combat to challenge you, and you're kind of like, oh sweet, but then you slowly realize the mistake you've made as your domain is not tethered to anything.
Like, I could imagine them coming back and being like, hey, I've discovered Sanakov Land, with some desperate attempt as it started sinking to kind of find innocence to bring. Yeah,
no, it's a definitely a fun answer. Here's one that I really liked by Brawl97, talking about a Chinese city called Beishuan, which in 2008 had a huge earthquake that led to a lot of fatalities, and like 80% of the buildings were destroyed. And following this, it was completely abandoned. Everyone was relocated, and the town was just converted into a kind of a memorial park, an abandoned town. Which is very, I don't know, it feels very pre-Abyss.
Yeah, that feels like the story that could be getting told about Jacob's Bell 6 months. That totally adds up to me. I liked this answer a lot.
Yeah, it was a good one. It felt a little recent, which is why I don't want to talk about it too much, because obviously there are people still alive that were affected by this today, but I can see it turn the seeds of a myth here.
Yeah, I agree. David L. Hunt brought the other answer that I think sort of had to be done, and that was Roanoke, the colony, which for those who don't know, I think was the first attempt at a permanent settlement in America by the British, and the supply chain kind of got a bit futzed because, such a long trip back then. So when the supplies finally arrived, the camp was just found abandoned. There's no one left, and the words Roanoke were just painted on a wall or something. And there's lots of reasonable explanations for what happened here. But David has what I think is the most reasonable explanation, which is that they all fell into the abyss because the lack of supplies sort of emblemized the lack of connection they had to the world at the time, and they all fell down.
Yeah. I mean, Roanoke has been kind of... there have been a lot of theories about Roanoke, the Roanoke settlement, right?
Yeah.
It does fit so well with the Abyss vibe.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like the Mary Celeste or the Bermuda Triangle, right? It's the classic supernatural style, the perfect blend of something that could lead into a ghost story.
Yeah. See the Bermuda Triangle, I reckon that's someone's domain that's poking into the abyss or something. That's where old Crooked Hat has his domain, actually.
I could see that. Maybe. Why not? I think my favorite answer to the discussion question was by Juanson, who kind of starts out by talking about how just people leaving a place or dying probably isn't enough to send something into the abyss, because otherwise, we would never discover any ruins ever. So there must be more active intervention. And they kind of segue from this to talk about this old Breton legend about a city called Caer-Is, which was this city that was built below sea level with these great big dikes to keep the water out, right? And they had gates that could be opened at low tide to let ships in, right? And there's this key, and the only copy of the key was with the king. And the legend kind of goes that the daughter of the king, the princess, was tricked into opening the gates at high tide, which then flooded the city and destroyed it. And the king kind of escaped on horseback with the daughter, although we'll get to that later.
Well, yeah, not quite.
Yes. So Juanson kind of makes a fun observation that this feels like a myth that was created to kind of back explain something that happened. And actually, this was probably a practitioner battle with enchantresses probably enchanting the princess and leading to her stealing the key to open the gate. And the kind of final bit that ties this all together is, as the king was escaping with his daughter, he kind of had a vision that he needed to sacrifice her in order to escape, and so threw her off of the horse so she drowned, which ties back into the idea of needing to sacrifice something of value in order to enter the abyss, which we saw when Blake took a little shortcut through the abyss to get outside. So presumably sacrificing your daughter would kind of trigger this abyss entry, which now means that this entire city could quite easily be sunk into the abyss. Which is so perfect. It all ties together so nicely. And in fact, it's so perfect that I'm now headcanoning that Green Eyes is actually this Princess Dahood, who has become a mermaid.
Man, she's been in the abyss for a long time.
Yeah.
I wanted to just quote an answer from BGO Miko, who they basically just sort of say Sodom and Gomorrah and Jericho from the Bible seem like examples of places that were just dropped into the abyss, which, is obviously, like, I think the quote, at least for Sodom and Gomorrah, isn't it just that they got hit with fire and brimstone? Like, it kind of seems like it could be an explanation for just like yeeting them into the abyss.
Yeah.
So BGO Miko also makes the connection that somebody should check to make sure that nobody's circling Jacob's Bell, blowing some kind of horn, which is kind of like what Molly's doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what Wabo is going for, because that's a very niche connection, but it actually works very well.
Yeah, it does. It's a good link, and we'll see if it eventuates, I suppose. I want to pull out one more, which is by Beard of Valor, who calls out not a specific place, but kind of talks about Route 66, which, if you're not familiar, Route 66 was a highway route that ran across a lot of America, until eventually there was an interstate highway system that was kind of a modernized highway designed to mobilize the military more quickly, which meant that Route 66 was functionally replaced. And so a lot of the towns and shops that were built along this road kind of got cut off from a regular supply of cars, which is the perfect setting for a town or a shop or anything to just kind of
slip through the cracks.
Exactly, right? Just by chance, by this highway being built, nobody passes by anymore, and so without traffic, it just kind of slips away. I absolutely love this idea, and I think it's being touched on in a number of pieces of pop culture, which again means that it's probably the perfect setting for a little Pact short story or something.
Yeah, I agree. So for my last one, I just quickly wanted to give some credit to Kyrgyzstan, who talked about Mikando from 100 Years of Solitude. This seemed like a good answer, but I'm not familiar with the story, so I didn't understand what Kyrgyzstan was talking about at all, which is more embarrassing because that was one of the Doof Book Club books like 5 months ago. 2
or 3 months ago, was it? Oh, yeah. 5 months ago, yeah.
I think it was in the middle of the year. Anyway, either way, it's something I should probably know more about, so that's embarrassing. So Kyrgyzstan, good effort, I think.
Good effort by everyone. Yeah. These were some great answers. I absolutely loved it.
I had a lot of fun with the
And now it's the part of the show where we would normally do a new discussion question. So what is it, Elliot?
Okay, so this week's discussion question is not happening because our recording schedule is a bit of a mess.
Yes.
So we thought what we might try instead is basically just doing a Q&A. So for about the next 2 weeks, we'll be, just submit us any questions you might have that you want us to answer. I guess preferably about Pact, but even if it's not and we think it's interesting, I guess we'll try and talk about it. But yeah, so it's, I guess you guys ask the discussion question to us this time.
Yeah. Ask us some questions, and in a little bit we'll be on to answer them, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's about the next 3 or 4 weeks that our recording schedule's off because of the holidays. So for the first half of that, we'll be taking questions that we'll talk about, and then I think the 2nd or 3rd week of January we'll be back on regular discussion questions.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll get Tony Jones on, and he'll help facilitate our questions and answers, and it'll be great.
Who's that reference for?
For all the other Australians that know what Q&A is, I guess. If you're not an Australian, then sorry, just some of these jokes aren't for you, I guess. But anyway, thanks for joining us. Leave your questions in the discussion thread, which will be linked, or email them to us at mediamdpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you didn't get enough doof out of Deep Impact this week, that's fine, we get it. Head on over to doofamedia.com where you can find out about all the rest of Doof and what's happening with everything else on the network.
Yes, and we should probably, again, talk about All Packed Up, the 24-hour live stream that we're doing at the end of this show, because this show will be, unfortunately, coming to an end on March 7th, but we'll do a 24-hour live stream. It'll be a lot of fun. If you have ideas for things you'd love to see us do there, again, leave it in the discussion thread or email us. We've already got a few great suggestions from people in the comments of the YouTube video, so that's great.
So, and obviously, that video with more details on what exactly is happening is, there's a copy of the audio of that in the podcast feed directly above or below this episode, but that audio also has a link to the video, which is better, I think. So if this is the first you're hearing about it, go check it out. Yeah,
if you want to know what our faces look like and do they match our voices, that video is the place to go. Of course, this show, despite the fact that it's coming to an end soon, would only exist at all. Sorry, that sentence was a bit of a mess, wasn't it? Let's try again. This show wouldn't exist at all without the support of all our lovely patrons. If you'd like to become a patron, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yes, and of course, as we like to mention, Wabo has a patron, patreon.com/Wabo, and if you donate to him, he won't fall into the abyss, and that's a win-win, double win for Wabo.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Man, we need to do a discussion question about tech startups that have fallen into the abyss. Because there's some interest in there, I think.
That'd be a juicy vein, absolutely.
Yes. WeWork is the big one at the moment, right? What is happening with that place? Anyway.
Oh, Peloton.
So what were we talking about? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's the end of this episode. And we'll be back soon on Friday the 13th of December, actually, for Sine Die 14.5. So we will see you then.
See ya.